was just a stupid dare. But I had no idea what I was about to discover under that pier. The door, they said, had been there for decades. Some say it leads to a place where no one ever comes back from. What I found down there still haunts me to this day. Part 1, the dare. Sometimes you look back at a moment and think, if I had just said no, none of this would have ever happened. Yeah, this is one of those moments. It was last summer. I went to stay with my cousin Jake in this tiny beach town. The kind of place where nothing ever happens, but the locals love telling spooky stories just to keep things interesting. The first night I got there, Jake took me to the boardwalk to meet some of his friends. It was one of those perfect summer nights. Warm breeze, waves crashing, the smell of salt water and fried food in the air. The boardwalk was still alive with people, but not too crowded. We were all sitting on the edge of the pier, legs dangling over the side, just talking about random stuff. School, girls, the usual. And then one of Jake's friends, this guy named Travis, says, "Hey, did anyone ever tell you about the door under the pier?" I laughed. "What door?" I asked. Jake looked at Travis, kind of smirking, but also a little serious. "The old metal door under the pier," Jake said. "Some say it's been there for decades. No one knows where it leads. But every summer, someone stupid enough tries to find it." Travis leaned in closer. "They say if you go through that door, you might not come back." Of course, I thought they were messing with me. Small towns love their ghost stories, right? So I rolled my eyes and said, "Yeah, sure. And what, some sea monster lives down there or something?" But then Travis grinned and pulled out his phone. He showed me this blurry picture, dark and grainy, but you could just barely make out what looked like a door wedged into the rocks beneath the pier. "Bet you can't find it," he said. "And even if you do, bet you won't go inside." Everyone was watching me, waiting to see if I'd chicken out. I tried to play it cool, but honestly, I felt this weird chill run down my spine. Still, no way was I gonna back down in front of these guys. So I smirked back and said, "Fine, I'll find your stupid door." If only I knew what was waiting for me down there. Part 2, finding the door. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about that stupid dare. Part of me was like, it's just a dumb story, man. There's probably nothing down there. But another part, I don't know. Something about that blurry photo Travis showed me. The way the door was just there, hidden under everything, it got under my skin. So that evening, just before sunset, I decided to go check it out. The boardwalk was still full of people. Couples holding hands, kids with ice cream, music from the arcade machines. Everything felt normal, safe. But as I walked toward the end of the pier, where the wooden planks creaked under my feet, the crowd started thinning out. No one was down there. It was like people knew to stay away when it got dark. I climbed over the railing, careful not to slip, and made my way down to the rocks. The waves were hitting hard that day, salty spray hitting my face, making everything slippery. I crouched low, moving under the pier where the wood was rotting and broken in places. Shadows stretched long from the setting sun, and that's when it hit me. I was completely alone. Just me, the waves, and that low creaking sound of the old boards above me. For a while I thought maybe they were messing with me. Maybe there was no door. But then, I saw it. Hidden behind a stack of old broken planks and seaweed, there it was. A metal door bolted right into the stone wall. It looked ancient, rust eating through the surface, like it hadn't been touched in decades. I got closer, my heart pounding harder with every step. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The heavy lock hanging on it wasn't locked anymore. It was snapped open, like someone, or something, had been there before me. I stood there for a minute, just staring at it, every part of me screaming to turn back. But then I thought about Jake and Travis, about how they'd laugh at me if I chickened out. So I reached out and grabbed the cold, rusted handle. I took a deep breath and started to pull. Part 3, going inside. As I pulled the door open, this awful smell hit me, like a mix of rotting seaweed, mold, and something else, something metallic like old blood. The door groaned so loud, I thought someone might hear it from up on the pier. But when I paused to listen, nothing. No voices, no footsteps. Just the sound of waves smashing against the rocks and that low, endless creak of the wood above. I held up my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook. because my hands were already trembling, but I stepped inside anyway. The walls were stone, slick with moisture, covered in patches of green moss and dark stains I didn't want to think too hard about. As I moved further in, the tunnel sloped downward like a spiral. Every step I took, I could feel the temperature drop. It was freezing, way too cold for a summer night. The deeper I went, the less I could hear the ocean. Instead, this low humming started, so faint I thought I was imagining it at first. But as I kept walking, the humming grew louder, not like machinery but something more alive. Then I noticed the walls. There were carvings everywhere, like someone had scratched them deep into the stone. At first, they looked like random symbols, spirals, triangles, weird lines. But as I ran my fingers over them, trying to figure them out, I realized some of them looked like figures, people, or at least something almost human. Thin, twisted bodies, huge empty eyes, like they were watching me from the walls. I kept going. I don't know why. Every part of me was screaming to get out, but my feet just wouldn't stop moving. Then I saw something that made me stop cold. Lying on the ground, half covered in dirt and grime, was a shoe. Not an old, worn-out shoe, but like a modern sneaker. Someone else had been here, recently. I picked it up for a second, and that's when I heard it. A sound, deeper in the tunnel. Like a whisper, but not words, more like breathing. Wet, heavy breathing. I froze, holding my phone up, trying to see what was ahead. But the tunnel curved and the light couldn't reach around the corner. Suddenly I realized how far I was from the entrance. If something was down there, there was no way out but back the way I came. And as I stood there trying to decide what to do, the breathing got louder, closer. Something was coming. Part 4, what I saw. I stood there, frozen, my flashlight shaking in my hand. That breathing, it was definitely real now. Slow, heavy, wet, like something struggling to inhale. I wanted to turn and run, but something deep inside me kept whispering, "Just a little further, just see what's around that corner." So against every instinct, I took a step forward, and then another. As I moved closer to the curve in the tunnel, I noticed something on the walls. It wasn't just carvings anymore. There were scratches, deep claw marks, like something had been trying to climb its way out. The breathing grew louder, and mixed with it, I could hear something else now. A whisper. But it wasn't like someone speaking to me. It was more like, "Help me." It was so faint, like a dying echo. Finally, I turned the corner. What I saw, I'll never forget it. The tunnel opened up into a small stone chamber. In the center of the room was a chair. But not just any chair. It was like an old wooden chair bolted to the floor, with heavy ropes still tied to the arms and legs, like someone had been tied down there. But that's not what made me stop breathing. All around the room, on the floor, the walls, even stuck to the chair, were photographs. Hundreds of them. I stepped closer to look. Every single photo was of a person standing on the boardwalk. Different people. Men, women, kids, all different times of day, different years, judging by the clothes. But in every single photo, behind them, standing way too close, there was this dark figure. Tall, thin, shadowy, like a man, but twisted. No face. Just darkness, where a face should be. I felt sick, like I was gonna throw up. And then, I saw one last photo lying right on the chair. When I picked it up, my whole body went numb. It was me, standing on the boardwalk, from the night before, when I was hanging out with Jake and his friends. And behind me, just like in all the other photos, that same figure, standing right over my shoulder. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And that's when I realized the breathing was right behind me now. I turned around slowly, shaking all over, and for just a second, in the beam of my flashlight, right at the edge of the darkness, I saw it. Tall, thin, twisted, head tilted to the side like it was watching me. Before I could even scream, the flashlight flickered and died. Part 5, the escape and what still haunts me. The second my flashlight went out, everything went black. And when I say black, I mean like total darkness. The kind where you can't even see your own hand in front of your face. But that breathing, it was still there, closer than ever. Slow, wet, like something huge was standing right behind me, just waiting. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, and I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Then I heard it. "Don't leave me." But it wasn't a growl or a monster sound. It sounded almost human, like someone broken, begging. I don't know what snapped in me at that moment, but I bolted. I didn't care where I was running. I just ran. I stumbled through the dark, slipping on wet stone, cutting my hands and knees on sharp rocks. The whole time I could hear it moving behind me. Dragging? Slithering? I don't even know. Somehow I found the way back to the tunnel. I could see just a faint crack of light where the door was still open, my only way out. But as I got closer, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The door was closing. Slowly but definitely moving, like something wanted to trap me down there. I sprinted, full speed, slipping and sliding, and threw myself at the door just as it was about to slam shut. I hit it hard, but I pushed through and fell out onto the rocks, scraping up my arms. I scrambled to my feet, kicked the door shut, and stood there for a second, gasping for air. But then, boom, something slammed into the door from the inside. So hard the metal rattled and groaned. I didn't wait to see what it was. I just ran. Ran all the way back to the boardwalk, not stopping until I was surrounded by people again. But here's the thing. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Like, yeah, I found the creepy door, and yeah, I got out. But now, I still feel like something followed me back. At night, when I'm walking home, sometimes I catch a glimpse of something just behind me in the reflection of store windows. Or I'll hear breathing, that same wet, heavy sound when I'm lying in bed and I know I'm alone. And a couple days ago, someone slipped a photo under my apartment door. It was me. Taken from behind, standing on the boardwalk. And in the photo, just like all the others, that same figure, watching me. So yeah, if you ever find yourself near that boardwalk and someone dares you to find that door, don't. Some doors should stay closed. If I told you a photo could curse you, would you believe me? Because last summer I took a selfie on a quiet boardwalk, and ever since, something has been following me. It started with a shadow in the picture. But what happened next made me question everything I know about reality. And if you think this is just another ghost story, wait until you hear what I found in my phone when I got home. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you might never take a selfie in public again. Part 1, Introduction, the day it all happened. I never really believed in ghosts. You know, I always thought those stories were just made up to scare kids or sell movies. But after what happened to me last summer, I don't know what to believe anymore. So, it was in July. I'd been going through kind of a rough time, work stress, relationship stuff, just life. I needed a break from everything, so I booked a weekend trip to this small beach town that a friend of mine recommended. The town itself was pretty quiet, but everyone kept saying you have to visit the boardwalk at sunset. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, it'll help you clear your mind. So my first night there, I decided to check it out. It was one of those perfect summer evenings. The sun was low, turning the sky orange and purple. The ocean breeze was soft and warm, and you could hear the sound of waves crashing against the pier. I remember walking along the boardwalk, just taking it all in. The smell of salt in the air, the sound of seagulls, the creaking of the wooden planks under my feet. There were a few people around, couples holding hands, kids eating ice cream, but it wasn't crowded. It felt calm, safe. At some point, I stopped at the very end of the pier, you know, where you can see the whole coastline stretch out on both sides. It was such a beautiful view. I wanted to capture it. So I pulled out my phone, took a few photos of the water, of the sunset, and even a quick selfie, because why not? Looking back now, I really wish I hadn't taken that last picture. Part 2, the photo that changed everything. Later that night, when I got back to my hotel room, I was feeling pretty good. You know, like maybe this trip was exactly what I needed to clear my head. I sat down on the bed, kicked off my shoes, and started scrolling through the photos I had taken earlier. Just casual shots, the sunset, the waves crashing, a couple of boats out on the water. They were nice. And then I swiped to that selfie. At first I didn't notice anything weird. I was kind of smiling. The sun setting behind me, it looked like a normal picture. But then I saw it. Right behind me, standing just over my left shoulder, there was this figure. It was tall, like way taller than me, and completely dark, like a shadow. But the weirdest part, the rest of the picture was perfectly clear. You could see the ocean, the sky, even tiny details like the texture of the wood on the pier. But this figure, it was blurry, almost like it was moving when I took the photo. But I swear, I didn't see anyone standing there when I took it. I was alone, completely alone. I kept zooming in, trying to figure out what it was. A person? A trick of the light? But the more I looked, the more wrong it felt, like it wasn't supposed to be there. And here's the thing that still gives me chills. The figure was so close to me, it looked like it was leaning in, like it wanted to be in the picture with me. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. My heart was pounding. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation, right? But deep down, I knew something was really, really off. Part 3. Things start to get weird. After seeing that photo, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe just a shadow, maybe someone walked behind me and I didn't notice. I mean, that happens, right? But the next day, things got weirder. First, when I woke up, my hotel room door was slightly open. Now, I know I locked it the night before. I'm one of those people who double checks, sometimes even triple checks. But there it was, open about a foot, like someone had been standing there watching me sleep. I told myself maybe I didn't close it properly. Tried to brush it off. But as I was leaving the room, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the floor, just inside the door, there was water, like wet footprints. But not mine. These were too big, like a man's footprints, and they were leading from the door toward the bed. I left the room as fast as I could and decided to go back to the boardwalk. I thought maybe getting out, being around people, would help me calm down. But when I got there, I couldn't shake this feeling. You know that feeling when you're sure someone's watching you, like there are eyes on you, but when you turn around, no one's there. And then I saw him, way out at the end of the pier, the same spot where I took that photo. A figure, just standing there, facing me, completely still. At first, I thought it was just some guy enjoying the view. But then, I realized he wasn't looking out at the ocean. He was staring directly at me. I blinked, and for a second, he was gone. Like he had never been there. But I swear to you, I know what I saw. From that moment, I knew, whatever was in that photo, it wasn't just a trick of the light, and it wasn't done with me yet. Part 4, the story of the pier's dark past. After that day at the pier, I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to convince myself I imagined it, but deep down, I knew I didn't. So that evening, I decided to go grab a drink at this little bar near the boardwalk. It was one of those small, cozy places where all the locals hang out. I figured maybe being around people would help me feel normal again. As I sat there, I couldn't help but ask the bartender if he knew anything weird about the pier. I tried to make it sound casual, like a joke. I said, "Hey, so is this place haunted or something?" He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, dead serious, like he already knew why I was asking. And then he said, "You saw him, didn't you?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't even told him what I saw, but he knew. I asked, "Saw who?" And that's when he told me. Apparently years ago, a man had died on that pier. Nobody knows exactly how. Some say he fell, others say he jumped, and some whisper that he was pushed. The body was never found. Since then, people say his spirit never left. The bartender told me there's a local legend. If you go to the pier alone at sunset, sometimes he appears. And if you take a photo with him in it, he's chosen you, the bartender said. And once he's chosen you, he follows you. I laughed at first. I mean, it sounded crazy, right? But the bartender just shook his head and said, "You think you're the first person to come in here asking about him? You're not." He even said some people who saw him started hearing things, seeing him in mirrors and photos they didn't remember taking, like he's always there, just behind you. I didn't know what to think. Part of me still wanted to believe it was just my imagination. But another part knew that photo I took wasn't just a mistake. And if what the bartender said was true, then maybe that thing wasn't done with me yet. Part 5, the final night, he followed me home. After that night at the bar, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing what the bartender said over and over. Once he's chosen you, he follows you. The next morning, I packed my things and left town early. I just wanted to get as far away from that pier as possible. I told myself once I was home, everything would be fine. That it was all just in my head. But it wasn't. When I got home, things started happening almost immediately. The first night, as I was falling asleep, I heard footsteps in my hallway. Slow, heavy steps. At first, I thought maybe it was just my neighbor, but then I remembered, I live alone, and my hallway is inside my apartment. The next day, I kept hearing knocking, not on my door, but from inside the apartment, like someone was knocking on the walls or on the inside of my closet. And then came the photos. I was going through my phone, trying to delete the picture from the pier, but when I opened my gallery, there were more photos. Photos I don't remember taking of me sleeping from the end of my bed, like someone had been standing there at night watching me. In every single one, that shadow figure was there. Closer, each time closer. The last photo I found, it was right behind me, like inches from my face. And the worst part, I was smiling in my sleep like I knew he was there. After that, I couldn't stay in my apartment. I left, stayed with friends, family, anyone. But no matter where I went, I'd hear those footsteps, I'd find new photos on my phone. It was like he was attached to me now. Sometimes when I look in mirrors, I swear I see something standing just behind me. Not moving, just watching. So yeah, I don't know what to do anymore. If you ever visit that pier, don't go alone. And whatever you do, don't take a picture. Because if he chooses you, there's no going back. There are things that lurk beneath the water. Things no one dares to talk about. Things that have been waiting for centuries. And tonight I'm going to tell you what happened when I got too close to them. I thought it was just an old man, but I was wrong. He wasn't just crazy. And the creature he warned me about wasn't just a myth. What I saw that night still haunts me. Part 1, the first time I saw him. It all started last summer when I got a part-time job at a Boardwalk ice cream stand. It was just supposed to be a way to make some extra cash, you know? I'd spend long hours there, standing behind the counter, serving families and tourists who came to enjoy the boardwalk at night. The shift was always long, and I was usually the last one to leave, way past midnight. At first, everything was normal, just another job, just another summer. But then, I started noticing something strange. Every single night, as the crowds thinned out and the boardwalk became quieter, I would see him. He always sat on the same bench, the one right by the edge of the pier. He was old, dressed in a long coat, even though the weather was warm. His hair was gray and unkempt, and his eyes were always fixed on the horizon, staring at the ocean. Never blinking, never moving. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, it's a boardwalk, right? People come and go all the time. Some sit alone, some just watch the waves. But there was something unsettling about him. It wasn't just that he sat there every night. It was the way he sat, perfectly still, like he was part of the scenery. And then there was the silence. No phone, no drink, no ice cream, just him in the ocean staring. And after a while, that's when it hit me. He never left. I thought it was weird at first, but hey, maybe he was just a regular who came here for some peace and quiet. But then something about him started bugging me. Every time I looked over, he was still there. The same bench, same position, staring. Never once did I see him move. And I'd stay late, sometimes even past midnight. But that guy, he was always there. Watching. Always watching. Part 2, Strange Encounters. It wasn't until a week later that I started to notice something more disturbing. It wasn't just that he never moved. There was this strange feeling every time I looked over at him, like he was always watching me. But when I'd glance away, I'd feel his presence even more, as if he was waiting for something or someone. One night, I asked my coworker about him. I couldn't help it. The old man was beginning to haunt my thoughts. "Hey, do you know who that guy is?" I asked. She just gave me this confused look and said, "What guy?" I turned and looked at the bench, and it hit me. No one else saw him. No one else even acknowledged him. He was always there, but I was the only one who seemed to notice. I started asking other people who worked on the boardwalk, just casually, but they all acted like I was crazy. No one seemed to care. No one else noticed this man. It was like he wasn't even real to anyone but me. I started feeling like I was losing my mind. I'd see him there every night without fail, but it was like I was the only one who could see him. The night started to feel longer, the air heavier, and that's when I noticed something else. Something even worse. One night, I walked past the bench, on my way to take a break. It was late, about 11:30 p.m. I glanced over at him and he wasn't looking at the ocean anymore. His eyes were on me. I froze. I don't know why, but it felt like he was waiting for me to come closer. I didn't stop walking, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. I didn't even want to look back, but I couldn't help it. When I did, he was still there, staring. It was like his eyes had followed me. I swear there was something unnatural about the way he looked at me. I never felt more exposed, but I told myself I was overthinking things. Maybe I was just tired. I tried to brush it off, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, always watched. And then there were the whispers. It started one night when I was locking up. I heard it clearly. Low, soft whispers, like someone was talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I looked around, but the place was empty. The old man was still sitting on the bench, but I wasn't sure if I heard it from him or from somewhere else. I couldn't tell. But that was the moment I knew I couldn't just ignore him anymore. Something was wrong with that man, something that I didn't understand. Part 3, the night I got too close. I'd been working late again, just like always. By the time I finished cleaning up, most of the tourists had already left. The boardwalk was quieter now, the air cold and heavy. It was a perfect night to go home and forget about the strange feelings I'd been having. But for some reason, I couldn't get that old man out of my head. I needed to know what was going on. I just had to get closer to him. As I walked past his bench again, I told myself I was being stupid. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to get involved. But something was pulling me in. Maybe I was just curious. Maybe it was all in my head. But I needed to see him up close, to figure out if he was real. I stopped a few feet away from him. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, like he hadn't blinked in hours. He didn't acknowledge me. He just stared at the horizon, unmoving. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, like the wind was carrying it to me. I leaned in, trying to make out the words. It was the same thing he'd been saying every night. Don't go in the water. Don't go in the water. Over and over. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought I was imagining it. My heart started pounding in my chest. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Something was off. I stepped back, not knowing what to do. My mind was racing. Was he talking about something that had happened? Was he warning me about something? And why was he only saying it to me? I should have walked away. I should have turned around and left, but I couldn't. My curiosity got the best of me, and I stepped closer to him. I wanted answers, even if I wasn't sure I could handle them. I leaned in even further, closer to his ear to hear him better. His voice, it wasn't like a regular voice anymore. It was almost a hiss, and that's when it happened. He turned his head slowly as if in slow motion. His eyes locked with mine, and for the first time I saw nothing, just darkness. I froze. His eyes were empty, not like a normal person's eyes. There was no soul there, no life, just darkness. And then with the faintest of smiles he whispered again, "Don't go in the water, don't go in the water." But this time I could feel it, like he wasn't talking about the ocean. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was racing and my legs were shaking. I couldn't breathe. I turned and ran. I didn't look back, but I could feel his presence. I could hear his whispers following me, getting louder as I sprinted down the pier. And I swear for a second, I saw something moving in the water. Part 4, the truth beneath the waves. I ran. I didn't know what I was running from, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I reached the end of the pier, where the lights flickered and the cold wind stunned my face. I turned around, expecting to see the old man, but he was gone. But even though he wasn't there, the air felt heavier. There was this presence. I couldn't explain it. The whispers kept echoing in my mind. Don't go in the water. But what did he mean? What was he warning me about? I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Maybe I was just tired. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the image of his eyes, those empty black eyes staring right through me. I had to know what was going on. I couldn't just leave it like this. I went back to the ice cream stand that night, hoping I could forget about the old man. But the moment I stepped inside, my coworker, Katie, she looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" You look pale." I shook my head, trying to brush it off. "Yeah, just a long night." But I could tell something was off. Her gaze was distant, like she was lost in thought. Then she said something strange. "I heard the pier's been closed for repairs." "Repairs?" I asked, not understanding what she meant, but she just nodded and kept wiping down the counter. "Yeah, there's something going on out there. They said it's been closed for weeks now." I frowned, confused. I hadn't heard anything about repairs. I left the stand, my mind racing. Was the pier really closed? I'd been there every night, but I hadn't noticed any signs, any barriers. The whole thing felt strange, but I had to go back. I needed answers. Something was wrong with the water, with that man. When I got there, everything looked the same as always. No repairs, no closed-off areas. But then I saw something I couldn't ignore. A strange symbol, carved into one of the wooden posts of the pier. It looked like a spiraling pattern, with sharp, jagged edges that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. I knew I had to find out more. Something about this place, this pier, was pulling me in. It wasn't just the old man anymore, it was the whole damn boardwalk. But that symbol, that mark, it was like a warning. Like something wanted me to stay away from the water. I decided to get closer to the water to see if there was anything strange there. As I approached the edge of the pier, the wind picked up. The whispers started again, louder this time. They weren't just in my head anymore. I could hear them clearly from the water. The closer I got, the clearer the whispers became. And then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, something moved under the surface of the water. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't a wave. It was something alive, something huge. I couldn't see it clearly, but I knew it was there, watching me. I turned to run, but something stopped me. The old man's warning echoed in my ears. "Don't go in the water. Don't go in the water." But it was too late. I felt it. A cold, wet sensation on my feet. The water was rising, and I wasn't alone. Part 5, the thing beneath. I tried to pull away, to run, but the water, it wouldn't let me go. I could feel it, cold, crawling up my legs, pulling me toward the edge of the pier. I knew I had to get away, but something was holding me there. I heard the whispers again, but they were different this time. Louder, angrier. The whispers weren't just in my head anymore. They were real. They were coming from the water itself, from below the surface. And that thing I saw moving, it wasn't just a shadow. It was something alive, something massive. I turned to run, but my legs were stuck, like I was sinking deeper into the ocean. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The whispers grew louder, then stopped, and then the most chilling sound filled the air. Something was breaking the surface. I finally managed to pull myself free, but not without hearing it. A growl, deep, earth-shaking, and then I saw it. Rising from the water, its massive, with the twisted form slowly emerging, like something ancient, something that had been waiting, hidden, for centuries. The creature that rose from the water, it wasn't just a warning. It was the reason the pier was cursed, the reason the old man had been trying to warn me. He wasn't just crazy, he knew. I thought I was going to die there, right on that pier, but then I heard a familiar voice, the old man's voice. "You should have listened," he whispered, just behind me. I turned, and for the first time I saw him clearly. His face was different. His eyes were hollow, dark, like the creature. His body twisted and contorted as if he had become part of it. I was horrified. This old man, he was the creature's servant. The whispers, the warnings, they were all part of the same curse. The creature in the water had been calling to him, to me. It was hungry, and I had come too close. In that moment I realized the truth. The pier, the ocean, the old man, it was all part of a ritual, a sacrifice. People had been disappearing from this boardwalk for years, not because of some accident, but because the thing in the water had been taking them. And I was next. The creature lunged toward me, its massive form a blur of darkness and rage. I thought it was the end, but as it reached for me, something unexpected happened. The old man, now fully transformed, stepped forward. He raised his hand toward the beast, muttering something under his breath. The water froze. For a second, everything was still. But then the old man's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and the water, the creature, the pier, it all disappeared in a flash of blinding white light. I was thrown back, landing on the ground, gasping for breath. I looked around. The pier was gone. The creature was gone. The old man was gone. I don't know what happened that night. All I know is that I woke up the next morning in my bed, like it had all been a bad dream. But the memory of it, the feeling of those eyes watching me, still lingers. I can't go back to the boardwalk. I can't even look at the ocean without hearing those whispers. And I know the creature is still out there. Maybe it was all in my head, but I don't think so. I know what I saw, and I know the creature's waiting, watching, for the next person who gets too close to the water. If you've ever walked alone on a boardwalk at night, you know that strange feeling, like someone's watching you. But what if that someone wasn't human? What if no one else could see them except you? Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story that will make you think twice before ever going back there again. Part 1, Introduction, the first encounter. It all started last summer when I was spending a lot of time at the boardwalk near my hometown. You know, that place where everyone hangs out when the weather's nice, with food stands, street performers, and all those little shops selling overpriced souvenirs. It was late afternoon around sunset. The sky was glowing orange and pink, and there were so many people around. Kids running past me, laughing, couples walking hand in hand, sharing ice cream. The usual summer vibe. I was sitting on one of those old wooden benches, scrolling on my phone, not really paying attention to anything around me. But then, I felt this weird sensation. Like, you know when you know someone is staring at you? Like you can feel it before you even see them? So I looked up, and that's when I saw him. There was a clown standing by the edge of the boardwalk, just beyond the food carts. He was facing me directly, like he had been watching me the whole time. And let me tell you, this was not some happy party clown. His costume was dirty, like it hadn't been washed in years. His face paint was all smeared and cracked, and the way he was just standing there completely still, it was like he was frozen, except his head, which tilted slightly when he realized I was looking back. At first I thought maybe it's just a street performer trying to get attention. But what really freaked me out, no one else seemed to notice him. People were walking right past him like he wasn't even there. Kids, adults, nobody gave him a second glance. It was like I was the only one who could see him. I stared for a few seconds, and then, honestly, I got scared. I looked down at my phone, pretending not to care, hoping that when I looked back up, he'd be gone. But when I finally glanced up again, he was still there. Closer this time, still staring right at me. Part 2, it keeps appearing. No one else can see him. After that first night, I honestly thought maybe I was just tired. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. You know, like when you see shadows in your room and think it's something else. So I convinced myself to forget about it. But then, a couple of days later, I went back to the boardwalk. It was a bright, sunny afternoon. There were even more people around. Families, groups of friends, music playing from the speakers above the snack stands. It felt safe. Normal. Until I saw him. Again. Same clown, same dirty costume, same smudged makeup, but this time, he was standing right in the middle of the boardwalk, just watching me as I walked past, like he had been waiting for me. I stopped in my tracks and stared, and guess what? No one else even looked at him. Not one person. People walked right past him, like he wasn't even there. That's when I turned to my friend who was walking with me and I said, "Hey, do you see that clown over there?" And she looked around, confused, and was like, "What clown?" I pointed straight at him, trying not to sound crazy, and said, "Right there. He's literally standing right in front of that ice cream cart." But when I turned to look again, he was gone, like he had never been there at all. My friend started laughing, saying maybe I needed to get more sleep. And honestly, maybe she was right. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I wasn't imagining him. I know what I saw. And here's the thing that really messed me up. As we kept walking, I could feel that same heavy stare on me. Like he was still there, somewhere, watching. From that day on, every time I went back to the boardwalk, he was there. Sometimes standing by the games, sometimes near the food stands, always in a different place, but always watching me. Part 3, getting closer. The clown starts to follow me. At this point, I was honestly starting to lose my mind. I stopped telling my friends about it because every time I did, they just laugh it off. "Oh, you're seeing clowns now?" they'd joke. But it wasn't funny to me. Not when I was seeing him more and more. And what made it worse, he wasn't just standing still anymore. One evening, I went back to the boardwalk with a group of friends. We were just hanging out, grabbing some food, and I was trying to forget about everything. Trying to pretend I was fine, but deep down, I was on edge, scanning the crowd every few minutes. And then I saw him again, but this time he wasn't at a distance. No, he was standing just a few feet away, next to a popcorn stand. His head tilted, that same awful smeared makeup, and the corners of his mouth twisted into this grotesque smile. Like he was enjoying this. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't help staring. And the second our eyes met, he started moving. Slowly, but directly toward me. My heart dropped. You know that feeling when your stomach twists into knots? That's exactly what I felt. I quickly turned to my friend, trying to stay calm, and said, "Hey, can we go somewhere else? Like now?" She asked why, but I just mumbled something about not feeling well. As we started walking away, I couldn't resist. I looked back, and yeah, he was following us, keeping pace, never looking away from me. It felt like I was the only one who could see this nightmare slowly stalking me through a place that used to feel safe. And the creepiest part? Every time we stopped to grab food or sit on a bench, he'd stop too, always standing nearby, always watching. It was like some messed up game to him, like he wanted me to know that he was there, that I couldn't escape him. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just some hallucination. This wasn't something I could ignore or explain away. He was real, at least real to me, and he was getting closer. Part 4, the breaking point, physical manifestation. After that night, I stopped going to the boardwalk for a while. I thought if I just stayed away, maybe he'd go away too. Like maybe he was tied to that place somehow. But I was so wrong. A few days later, I was home, just trying to relax, sitting on my bed, scrolling on my phone. It was late and my room was dark, except for the glow of the screen. Everything was quiet, and for a moment, I actually felt safe. Until I got this weird feeling. You know, like when you feel like someone is standing right behind you. I felt my skin crawl, like ice running down my back. I told myself, "Stop it, you're just freaking yourself out." But then, I heard it. A faint squeak, like a balloon being twisted. You know that sound clowns make when they make balloon animals? But I was alone, completely alone. I froze. I didn't want to turn around. I just stared at my phone, pretending I didn't hear it. But then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a reflection in my window. It was him, standing right behind me, inside my room. I spun around so fast, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. Nothing, just my empty room. But when I looked back at the window, that's when I saw it. A handprint, pressed against the glass, a perfect red smear, like it was made with a clown glove covered in paint, or something worse. And here's the thing. I live on the 3rd floor. There's no way someone could have reached that window from outside. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I just sat in bed, lights on, staring at that handprint until the sun came up. And when morning came and I finally got the courage to go look, it was still there. That's when I realized, whatever this thing was, it wasn't just at the boardwalk anymore. It had followed me home. Part 5, the final encounter and a warning. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every little sound. It felt like he was everywhere. I'd see him in reflections, in windows, in mirrors. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and swear I could see his shadow standing in the corner of my room, just watching me. It was like he was waiting for something, like he was playing with me. But then, one night, it got worse. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to go back to the boardwalk, thinking maybe if I faced him, if I showed him I wasn't scared, he'd leave me alone. Dumb idea, I know, but I was desperate. It was late, way past midnight. The boardwalk was almost empty, just the sound of waves crashing and the creaking of the wooden planks under my feet. Everything was dark, except for a few flickering streetlights. And then I saw him. He was standing at the very end of the boardwalk, waiting. I felt my whole body tense up, but I forced myself to walk toward him. Step by step, my heart was racing. I was sweating, even though the night air was freezing. When I got closer, I could finally see his face, and it was even worse than I remembered. His skin was pale, like wax. His makeup was cracked and peeling, and his eyes, God, his eyes were pure black, like there was nothing human left in there. And then he did something he'd never done before. He spoke. He leaned in close, so close I could smell this awful rotting candy scent, and he whispered in this low, raspy voice, "You're mine now." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like I was frozen. And then he smiled, wider than any human should be able to smile. Next thing I knew, I woke up at home, in my bed, like it was all a dream, but I knew it wasn't. Because when I sat up and looked at my window, the handprint was back, fresh, red, like he had been there, like he had brought me home himself. And now, I see him everywhere, on the bus, at school, in crowds, always watching, always waiting. So, if you ever go to the boardwalk at night and you see a clown standing all alone staring at you, don't look at him. Don't acknowledge him. Because once you do, he'll never leave you alone. If you ever find yourself walking alone on a boardwalk late at night, and you see a girl in a white dress standing at the edge, staring out at the ocean, don't look her in the eyes, because I did, and I think she's still following me. This isn't just some creepy story I heard. This actually happened to me, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why I'll never set foot on that boardwalk again. Part 1, The Legend of the Boardwalk. There's an old story everyone in my town knows. A story about a girl who disappeared one summer night on the boardwalk. No one knows exactly what happened to her. Some say she ran away, others think something much darker happened. Her name was Emily. She was just 16 when she went missing, right after one of the biggest summer festivals our town ever had. You know, the kind with fireworks, loud music, people laughing and dancing. But while everyone else was having fun, Emily was waiting for her boyfriend, the one who never showed up. The last time anyone saw her, she was standing at the very edge of the pier, staring out at the ocean. Some fishermen said they saw her dress blowing in the wind, like she was thinking about jumping. But no one ever found her. No body, no note, nothing. Since then, people say she never really left. There are stories about a girl in a white dress, walking along the boardwalk late at night, long after all the lights go out. Some say she's looking for her lost love. Others say she's trying to find her way home. But one thing's for sure, if you see her, you should never follow. To be honest, I always thought it was just a ghost story, something older kids made up to scare us, until the night I saw her for myself. Part 2, The Night It Happened. It was one of those hot, sticky summer nights. You know, the kind where the air feels heavy and even the ocean breeze can't cool you off. Me and a couple of friends decided to hang out at the boardwalk. It was almost empty because it was so late. Most of the tourists were gone for the season, so the rides were shut down, and the only sounds were the waves crashing and the creaking of the old wooden planks under our feet. Honestly, it felt kind of peaceful, but also kind of creepy. We were just messing around, daring each other to do stupid stuff. You know, bet you won't walk to the end of the pier alone, that kind of thing. And of course, I took the dare. As I walked toward the end of the pier, the fog started rolling in, thick and fast. It was weird because like 5 minutes earlier, the sky was totally clear. But now I could barely see past a few feet in front of me. That's when the lights on the boardwalk started to flicker. First, it was just a soft dimming, like when a bulb's about to go out. But then, for a second, they all went out, like the whole boardwalk had gone dark. I stood there frozen, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the sound of waves and the boards creaking in the wind. And then I saw her. There was a figure standing right at the end of the pier. A girl. Her long hair was hanging down, and she was wearing what looked like an old white dress. She wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the ocean. At first, I thought maybe it was just some girl from town, but as I took a step closer, I realized there was something wrong. I couldn't explain it, but everything in me was screaming that this wasn't normal. And that's when I remembered the stories about Emily, the girl who never left the boardwalk. Part 3, The First Encounter. So there I was, standing maybe 20 feet away from her. And I don't know what it was, but something in my gut told me to turn around and leave. But I didn't. I couldn't. It was like something was pulling me closer. I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" My voice sounded way smaller than I expected, like even the ocean was louder than me. She didn't answer, didn't even flinch, just kept standing there staring out at the water. I took a couple steps closer, trying to get a better look, and that's when I realized her dress was completely dry. Which doesn't sound weird until you remember the fog was so thick by then, everything around was damp. My clothes were sticking to me from the moisture in the air. But she looked untouched, like she wasn't even there. And then I noticed something else. Her feet. She wasn't wearing any shoes, and her feet weren't even touching the boards. She was standing just a few inches above them, like floating. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. The wind was blowing hard, but her hair wasn't moving. Her dress wasn't moving. It was like she was frozen in time. And even though she wasn't looking at me, I swear I could feel her eyes on me, like she knew I was there. I wanted to run. Every part of me wanted to just turn around and sprint back to my friends, but I couldn't move. I was stuck there, staring at her. And that's when she turned her head. Slow. So slow it didn't even look real, like watching an old film reel in slow motion. And when her face finally turned toward me, I realized she didn't have any eyes, just empty, dark holes. That's when I snapped out of it. I turned and ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. But even as I ran, I swear I could hear the sound of her bare feet on the wooden boards behind me, following me. Part 4. What the locals say. The next day, I couldn't get what happened out of my head. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those empty black holes where her eyes should have been. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of prank, like some messed up local tradition to scare tourists. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. So I decided to ask around. I started with my grandma. She's lived in this town her whole life. When I told her what I saw, she got real quiet, like pale. Like I said something I wasn't supposed to bring up. She said, "You shouldn't have talked to her." And when I asked who her was, she just shook her head and said, "That poor girl. She's been trapped here longer than you've been alive." Turns out, everyone in town knows about Emily, but people don't like to talk about her. Like if you say her name, you might bring her back. Some of the fishermen, the ones who work late at night, swear they've seen her walking along the water, even when there's no one else around. One of them told me he once saw her standing at the very end of the pier, right before a storm hit. Said she was crying. Others say she appears when something bad is about to happen, like she's some kind of warning, or maybe she's looking for someone to take her place. But the thing that really got me was when one old man, who's lived here longer than anyone, said, "If she looks at you, like really looks at you, she won't let you go, she'll follow you home." That's when I realized, when she turned her head toward me last night, when she looked straight at me, what if that wasn't the end? What if it's just beginning? Part 5. My last visit. She saw me too. I tried to move on. For days, I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me that night. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Little things started happening. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and swear I heard footsteps on the floorboards outside my window, even though I live on the second floor. Or I'd walk past a mirror and think, for just a split second, that I saw someone standing behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing. After a week of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back. I had to see if she was real, or if I was just losing my mind. So one night, just past midnight, I went back to the boardwalk. It was colder than before, and there was this thick fog covering everything. It felt like the world had shrunk down to just me, the wooden boards under my feet, and the sound of waves crashing in the dark. I walked all the way to the end of the pier, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And at first, nothing. No one was there. I almost laughed, thinking I had imagined it all. But then, I felt it. That same icy chill, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned slowly, and there she was. Closer this time, so close I could see the pale skin of her face, the way her dark hair clung to her cheeks. But what scared me the most were her eyes. They weren't empty now. They were there, dark, sunken, and filled with something I can't even describe, like sadness and anger all mixed together. And this time, she wasn't just staring out at the ocean. She was looking right at me, right into me, like she knew everything about me. every secret, every fear. She raised her hand and pointed not at me, but out toward the water, like she wanted me to look. I turned my head, and for a second I thought I saw something moving in the waves, like another figure standing waist deep in the dark water, just waiting. But when I blinked, it was gone. When I looked back, she was gone too. She was gone too. Just vanished like before. But here's the thing. Ever since that night, I keep seeing her, not just on the boardwalk, sometimes in reflections, in windows, in mirrors, and every time, she's closer than before. So if you ever go walking on a boardwalk late at night and you see a girl standing alone, staring at the ocean, don't look her in the eyes, and whatever you do, don't follow her gaze. So now you know why I'll never step foot on that boardwalk again, and if you ever see her, don't say I didn't warn you. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And if you love creepy true stories like this one, make sure to subscribe, because I've got even more terrifying tales coming soon. You don't want to miss them. Stay safe out there, and watch your back.